Impending Darkness event guide, take 9,432. This one has been tough to get done. What's up out there? I got a comment on an old Impending Darkness guide that I had from a couple years ago, probably when Throne of the Herald came out, and somebody asked me if I would update it with all the new content we've got. We've got a whole bunch of different options with Atlas of Discovery now, with the new Stronghold gems or whatever these enhancements are called. There's a lot of new things in here, so I can update this video. I am going to try to blast through this as fast as humanly possible. We're going to cut a lot of corners, skip a lot of potential things. So if there's anything you have questions about, drop a comment down below. And if you want a longer video, I'm happy to make a longer video, but a lot of people don't like to watch very long videos. So I'm going to try to make this as fast as possible, cut a lot of things short, and just skip through this as quickly as possible and leave a lot of nuance out. So let's dive in. If you're going to go do the Impending Darkness event, you click on Dungeons, you select Impending Darkness and click Start Event. You will be brought to this dialogue here. The event does take an hour and a half, 2 hours. It takes a very long time to complete. You can pause in between. There are times for doing that. You cannot do any combat skills while you're in the event, but you can do non-combat skills. And once you start, you're basically locked in. You can stop the event. You can also run from the individual Slayer areas, but once you stop the event, you're done. So if you're 4 iterations or 4 phases into this and you quit, you have to do those 4 phases again. So another hour and a half of your life is gone. So it's in your interest to do this in either one shot or make it to where you can get through it. You don't want to die. You die, you start over. You don't want to back out. You back out, you start over. There are times when you would want to back out and start over, which at this selecting passive spot, if you get 3 bad choices, is a good time for it. But again, if you're 4 phases in and you have 3 bad choices, do you want to waste another hour and a half having to redo all that, or just take a bad choice and try to win? Anyway, when you start the event, you're going to be, each phase of the event, you have to select a passive. There will be 5 of these in action at once when you're done. They will stack. So you're going to pick 1, and then you're going to have 2, and then you're going to have 3, and then you're going to have 4. My finger's getting all wrong, but you will have up to 5 of these by the time you finish it. There is a cheat sheet I will paste in below. The ones at the bottom you want to avoid at all costs. The ones at top are the ones that are acceptable. I do not like this on the top of the naughty list is the 50% chance to apply burn or frostburn. That one messes with your manual healing and you end up not attacking because you're trying to heal that regular tick of fire. I don't like that. The next one gives max hit. The enemy will hit harder, faster, and you will have a harder time hitting them. You don't want more affliction stacks or lifesteal. You're already in the base game. We're at, this is all going to be base game stuff in here. You don't want 5% stronger Slayer negation because you don't have the 5% overhead. Heal 4% of hit points every 2 turns is not good because then you have to work against it. Anything that makes the monsters live longer or regenerate health makes the fight take longer. And you don't want this fight going on any longer than you absolutely have to. And the final one is one that the wiki actually recommends taking. I don't really get their thinking on this. So the final boss, which you will fight 5 times, is immune to stun, freeze, and sleep. And I think that's why they tell you to take this, is because he's immune to it. You're going to fight 50 mobs along the way that are not immune to it. So if you could stun them to where they're not hitting you and you're just killing them faster because you get a little bit of a damage buff on something that's stunned, frozen, or slept, that's why I don't like taking this one. I think it's a stupid idea. So anyway, I'll link these below. There's the good bad, and then there's the bad bad. So you go in here and you pick one. We don't want to get, the poison one's not a big deal. The poison doesn't really apply, tick down as often as bleed or fire does. So poison's okay. In this one, you don't want them doing life stack. I think the 2,000 hit point one's probably higher. I would also add that the higher something is on the top 6, those are the ones you want to take. So like this one's got this chance to poison, which is at number 4. The one right above it is this one up here, which is gives them more hit points and less of a max hit. So you have to do a little bit more damage to them, but they hit you less hard. So if you take that, that's kind of a little bit of a bonus in some ways. Okay. So every time you do a phase of this, you're going to have to pick a debuff. The list will be below. Then you're going to be presented with this. All your combat areas are grayed out except for these 4 Slayer areas. The way you do, the order you take these in matters. You're going to want to start with the Unhallowed Wasteland, then do Dark Waters, Shrouded Badlands, and end up at the Perilous Peaks. Perilous Peaks last means that you're going to fight the boss there. I believe the reason you do this in this particular order is it reduces the amount of gear changes that you have to make and pretty much makes the worst thing the first thing, which is the Unhallowed Wasteland. To tackle the Unhallowed Wasteland, you'll notice that I am putting this on my screen to where I can read this enemy's heal whatever percent of their current hit points and the gear selection down here. Because you're going to be starting this fight over and over and over again, you go through the 4 different Slayer areas and then you beat the boss and start back over. I have to go swap all my gear back. So what I do is I get this to where I can read it and then I deliberately press through every one of my combat styles and make sure that stays 0%, because this is the first one you're fighting. If you fight these in random orders, it just puts it a routine on it because you're doing this 5 times. So if you get into that habit, when you do Unhallowed Wasteland, you will be guaranteed that you have all the right Slayer negation equipped, because if you have something that doesn't have Slayer negation on it, you will have a % chance for them to regain hit points every couple turns. You do not want that. Anything that makes the 2-hour fight longer is bad. Okay, before we get into all the gearing sections and everything, let's talk about agility very quickly. Obstacle 1 and 2 doesn't matter. Obstacle 3, you want pipe climb. 4 is coalstones. 5 is cliff balance. 6 is rocky waters. You could use lake swim here. The wiki recommends lake swim, but they're kind of similar. This one gives you more damage to monsters with a little bit of damage reduction. Take your pick. Lake swim probably would be maybe the recommended one, but take your pick. Obstacle 7, just don't take take either boulder trap or water trap. Just don't take a negative for combat. Obstacle 8 would be raft building. Obstacle 9 is ice jump. Obstacle 10 is ocean rafting. And then, of course, take the Pillar of Combat. If you have the Throne of the Herald expansion, you can use all of the obstacles below and the Elite Pillar of Conflict or whatever it's called. You can absolutely use those. You can absolutely get all your skills to 120, which means more hit points, which means more strength and ranged and magic, so more damage. You can also use the astrology side. You want all these taken, and if you have the Throne of the Herald expansion, you can absolutely take advantage of that. With the Throne of the Herald, you can absolutely take advantage of these rings and amulets that are in here, like the Iridium Zephite necklace that gives you 4% damage reduction when fighting against the dungeon boss. You will notice there is nothing on here that says you have to have beaten Impending Darkness. For an example of gear that does say you have to have beaten Impending Darkness, if you look at this Carrion Body, it says it right here and requires a level that you can't get in the base game without beating Impending Darkness. So I want to point that out. Somebody was asking about that the other day. You can absolutely use any rings and all of the rings and amulets from the Throne of the Herald expansion. You just have to go craft them up. You have to go get smithing, mining, smithing, and crafting up to be able to do that. And they're available to use. Anything that comes from combat or farming and stuff like that, you can't use, but any of the stuff that comes from like crafting, fletching, you cannot use bolts or arrows from the expansion either, but there's a lot of other options that you can use. So fit those in where you can. Okay. So all that out of the way. And I guess I'll add at this point, if you have Atlas of Discovery, let me back up out of the event here. If you have Atlas of Discovery, you can go into Underwater Ruins. There are weapons here like the Water Pulse Staff, the Engulfing Vortex Longbow, and the Hasty Trident. They are two-handed, but they all have 8% damage reduction. So those are good to use. Let's see, we need to go back into this. Those are good to use for weapons, and those are very helpful. So we start the event. I just picked a random thing there. Don't just ignore what I picked. I just picked one to get in here and start chatting. The combat gear, or the gear that you're going to need for the Unhallowed Wasteland portion, is heavy on Slayer negation. You have to get this down, otherwise enemies will heal, and the faster they heal, the longer the fight takes. So you're going to want 3 pieces of Slayer gear on each combat, and you have to switch between you want to follow the combat triangle as you go through this. So you want all your combat styles geared up the same way. You're going to have the helmet and chest piece, the Slayer skill cape or the max skill cape, whichever one, Hunter's ring, and then a 3rd piece of Slayer gear up here. I use the helmet that this is strong against. So melee is good against following the combat triangle, it's good against ranged. If I go over here, magic is good against melee and ranged against magic. You will all see that they have the Hunter's ring, the 3 pieces of Slayer gear, and the skill cape to match. That gives you a 0% chance for those monsters to heal. When you're done with Unhallowed Wasteland, there will be a pause. When you start this here, you have to fight the monsters in that Slayer area. Then you're done. When you've killed them off, there will be a final one that's kind of like a little mini boss. When you kill it, you're done with that area. This will gray out, and then you'll have to pick one of these next areas. So you're going to do a gear change. Now, these 2 areas, you lose accuracy and attack interval. It's not the end of the world, but I don't like taking any more than I have to. So I would probably just switch out 3 pieces of my gear. Probably go into something like this for melee. So you got the Fighter Amulet, the Infernal Cape, Relentless Fury Gloves, and the Relentless Fury Ring. That still means that I have 0% accuracy. I don't have a debuff against accuracy or interval. On magic, I would do the same thing. I would switch out to, say, the Warlock Amulet, Infernal Cape, and Burning Madness Ring, so I can do some more fire damage. And then over here, I would do the Deadeye Amulet, the Infernal Cape, and the Poison Virulence Ring. So that leaves these at 0%. When you get to the Perilous Peaks, this one really doesn't matter. You can actually swap out to full God gear if you want. You definitely swap out to full God gear when you're going to fight the boss portion of it. And as mentioned, when he comes up, so I would probably leave my Slayer gear here because that, a little bit of evasion ratings is not a big deal. You're going to pretty much beat up everything in here without having an issue. And actually, you would need the Slayer cape for that because you have to have or the max skill cape because you have to have these equipped. So I think there's now that I'm looking at that, yeah, you would need this. So you probably wouldn't be able to use the Infernal cape for those 2 at least. My bad. But that means you could switch out your helmet to something different. I don't know. There's multiple ways of taking this. I don't want to get bogged down on the whole gear setting. When you're actually fighting the final boss, if you don't need that to be in the area, you can equip all this other gear. So then you're going to fight the final boss, and at whatever combat style he is, you have to match his combat style. So if he's ranged, you have to match ranged. If you can't defeat that combat style, you can absolutely run from the fight. Do not stop the event, just run from the fight. You will have to redo the Perilous Peaks, but then you get a chance at a different, his combat style is random each time. All right, we're doing okay on time here. So that is basically how everything goes. You're going to want to run through, as an example, on the melee side, if you're, let's say we go through the different, we start the event, you pick your debuff, you go into Unhallowed Wasteland with, I'm missing something, oh, this here. You go into Unhallowed Wasteland, you've got 0%, enemy can regenerate 0%, they heal 0%. So this would be what I would tackle the Unhallowed Wasteland with. Then you would switch your gear. You would switch out maybe the passive, the ring, and maybe the helmet or something like that to some gear. Do the next 3 areas for each combat set. You want to switch those out. Do the next 3 areas, and then when you're fighting the boss, you would do the boss setup. Fighter Amulet doesn't work against him, so you'd have to do something different. Now, when you beat the boss, you're going to have to come back out and start over again. So you would reset your gear to go the Unhallowed Wasteland. Once you're done with the Unhallowed Wasteland, you don't need all the Slayer negation. You can swap gear, go through the next 3 areas, swap gear to fight the boss, come back out, pick your debuff, swap gear for the Unhallowed Wasteland. It's a lot of gear swapping through here. So make sure that you have your quick equip menu set up with all the gear you plan to use. Now, when you beat Bane, each time you beat him for the first 3 times, you're going to get a new shield each time. You'll get the shield of melee power, This has a little bit more damage reduction than the Dragonfire Shield. It's got 9%, so you could swap that out, and then that frees up your passive for something different. You will get the Shield of Ranged Power on the second time through, so you can put that on. Again, it's 9% damage reduction. You could actually put that as your shield and then put the Scaled Shield up here in your passive for doing poison damage. And then the third shield you get is the Shield of Magic Power. Again, 9%. I would be more inclined to put this up in my passive on the magic side because that leaves the Earth Layered Shield with 12% damage reduction, and this with the passives that give me more chance to apply burn, frostburn, stuff like that. That's just more chance to burn. Prayer-wise, for most of the fight, you're going to want, say, like Battle Heart and Augury for magic, Battle Heart and Piety for melee, Battle Heart and Rigor for ranged. When you get to the actual Bane portion of the fight, you're going to want to swap over to Protect from whatever you're fighting against. So if it's ranged, you want to put Protect ranged. If it's melee and you're in melee, you want to protect melee. You don't want him hitting you and applying stacks of affliction. You're going to get a lot of affliction, and as he applies affliction to you, it reduces the amount of health you have or the amount of auto eat that works. So you will have to come in and hold manual heal, which gets back to the whole don't take the one that catches you on fire, because that really sucks and it makes the fight take longer. And then you just rinse and repeat. You will get on the fourth attempt when you beat him, or when you the fourth phase, you will get the Ring of Power. You can put that on like magic or something like that. And then the fifth time you beat him, you're done. That's it. You've won. I think I've got everything. I think that covers it all. To recap, you start the event, you select a debuff, you do Unhallowed Wasteland. You want max Slayer negation on the Unhallowed Wasteland. Then once you've beaten that, you can switch some items out, do Dark Waters, Shrouded Badlands, and then finally the Perilous Peaks. When you get into the Perilous Peaks, you're going to switch gear again to be the gear for the boss fight. You'll switch your prayer out to Protect from ranged. If you are melee or ranged at that point, you also want to switch over to Diamond Luck. If you are magic fighting the boss, you can actually use Gust or Incinerate. I mean, you could use Slicing Winds, but I would prefer Gust or Incinerate. They do more damage. I like Incinerate because it burns things down pretty consistently and it goes off all the time. You don't miss. It has something that catches fire and it's just a steady down drip. And then you just rinse and repeat. So you do debuff, Unhallowed Wasteland, Dark Waters, Shrouded Badlands, Perilous Peaks, boss fight, next, and then you're out, and then you're done, and then you're off onto all the expansions. I hope that's covered everything. If not, put a question down in the comments section below. If you want a really long video, like a 45-minute or hour-long video about this, I'm happy to do it. There's a lot of gear we could talk about, but it's going to be a long video that really nobody wants to see. So hopefully this video's covered everything and it gets you through it. That will do it for this one. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.